Justin Bourne, Real Kyper Bourne, Leafs regional analyst. Are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. You sound good, too. Did you figure out the Merlin?
Yeah, it's a quality item we got here.
Yeah,
I just had to re-download the app, that's all.
Oh, that's good.
I hadn't used it all summer.
Yeah, that's just the old classic, plug it in and unplug it. I love that move.
Yeah.
That's the only move I know, by the way. Anyway, all right. So I had been doing this offseason where I was a little frustrated with the Leafs. I hadn't talked about them as much this offseason as in years past. And maybe it was vacation. Maybe it was just like going down to the 1 hour show and focusing more on the Blue Jays. But like I think I had you on once all summer, right?
Yeah.
And one of my gripes was, hey, what are we going to talk about with this team? And then I was prepping. I was doing all my, preseason note collecting and all of these different storyline discussions that I wanted to have with my guests. And I realized that I'm dumb because there's so much. There's so much. And there's actually quite a bit different than last year. So I want to play a game with you today, right? Where it's overrated, underrated, or properly rated Leafs narratives, okay? So I'm going to just say a narrative to you. You tell me if it's one of those three things, and then maybe we'll have a short discussion off of it. I'm going to start with this. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. The Nyes, Minton, Yarn, Croc line is the most interesting and has the potential to be a season-long group.
Ooh. Yeah, I think that's... I don't know what other people are really saying about it, so I don't know what to call it properly rated, but maybe underrated?
It's the next thing. It's the next question that I have for you.
It's probably underrated because this is a whole new addition. You and I have been soldiers on this 7 or 8 year core journey of them like trying to get past this, and every year it's like, all right, their third line should feast. Right? Like the top two lines are going to get matched up. They're so deep offensively. Their third line should feast. Watch Kapanen, Andreas Janssen, and whoever else. Watch what they're going to do to third lines. And we're like, again, maybe it's year 8 of watch what this third line can do. And it hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's been Alex Kerfoot being on all of them, and maybe it's been other things, but this is undeniably a storyline that if they could just pull the third line out of thin air that they can use, it's very interesting. I don't know that it'll make it all the way through the year, but it's certainly worth giving some runway to.
It's incredible to me that there's a line that's going to have Tyler Bertuzzi and then 2 of the best, 12 players on the planet. Matthews top 5 and Marner somewhere in there, depending on, if you like him, if you don't. And it's, to me, not a conversation amongst most Leaf fans of who you're most interested in seeing to start the year. It's the youth line, right? It's a fresh injection for the team. I think the runway question is super interesting, but basically the second question of this is like overrated, underrated, properly rated. The Fraser Minton story is fun, but really it's an indictment of what this team has down the middle.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll say that's maybe an underrated story too, just that Minton to me does not feel like a guy that the Leafs intend to be on the team in playoffs. Then again, they didn't intend for him to be on the team out of training camp either. So that's not to say he can't do that. He can't play his way onto the team, but I just think they're really excited about where he is, considering where he came from. He had a great summer. He has surprised a lot of people and gotten a lot more runway than expected. But I think this is let's take a look. Let's get him back to junior, give him a great start for the year. I mean, otherwise, they wouldn't have had Willie play in center in training camp if they had intended this. So I don't think they intend him to be here all the way along. They're just going to give him a look. And then, you can call that an indictment for sure, considering last year very recently, they tried to give Ryan O'Reilly I think 4 times $4.5 million contract to stay with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They wanted a third line center. They weren't able to get the guy they wanted. So, they're a little shorthanded, and all of a sudden this becomes a more viable option when you don't have anyone better.
I think it's a little underrated as a storyline just because of that. We got swept up in the excitement of it, and I like that, right? Because this is when the season is anew, and we have all the hope, and you can dream on a guy like Fraser Minton being an impact player for this team. But you're right. Ultimately, 2 things can be true. I'm excited to see what this guy can do. I think that he's probably further ahead of schedule, that all of the maturity stuff that people talk about him is likely real. I don't think that it's just purely lip service or a PR campaign for him. But I also think that he had to beat Pontus Holmberg for this position, right? He had to knock Noah Gregor off of this position, it wasn't exactly the depth of field where he blew someone out of the water where you went, man, that's pretty shocking that he ended up grabbing this spot. They tried William Nylander there. They wanted Ryan O'Reilly back. They were willing to give him that contract despite his age. They went, yeah, we need to have you down the middle because what else is the option? That's the thing that was, I think, missed a little bit with David Kampf, right? Is, yes, did I really hate the Kampf signing? No, because he plays games and you know what he is, and I think he's a fine player. But they did have to give him a little bit too much because they couldn't lose him for nothing. Like they couldn't go into an offseason where they said, wait, it's Holmberg for sure? It's Holmberg for sure in your bottom six, potentially as your third line center. So I think that part of the clunkiness of this roster is that they just couldn't let him go. So, yeah, I think that they're the most exciting group coming into the team. I don't know if they have potential to be a season-long group, just considering the wear and tear that's going to be put on a 19-year-old kid who, when they show him on the bench, I'm like, I'm the world's oldest man. This is how I know. This has happened. I'm really feeling this now, the age thing.
If I may, I saw Connor Bedard's number was 98. I was like, maybe he was born in 98. And then I was like, nope, that would make him 25.
Yeah.
He's born in 2005.
No, yeah, I was going to say, if you're old, here's what I would say. If you're older than 32, don't look at all at anyone coming into any league's birth years, right? Like, don't do it. Don't do any of it.
They ran the, Crosby was drafted a week after Bedard was born type of thing last night.
Yesterday was my perfect game because it was like it had a bunch of players who were still older than me, and I was enjoying that. I was like, nice.
Nice.
Yeah, this is sweet.
I mean, how many are you down to in the league?
Oh,
I think Giordano might be older than me, but maybe not. I'm 40.
He's younger than you. Yeah, because he's 39. I don't think you've got anybody anymore. You need a Yager comeback. You need Yager.
This is it. Yager's 90.
Yeah, I know. You really
pick someone young. Yeah. Joe Thornton, maybe.
Yeah, Thornton. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, Marlowe wants to come back. I don't know. I think that you'd be the oldest one now.
It's over. I'm older than everyone in the NHL.
Yeah, I know. See, so I'm sorry to do this to you. I was really not trying to ruin your day, but yeah, I had a few guys yesterday, and it was really, really nice. Corey Perry, I told you I want him to be the new Yager where he plays till he's 42 years old because I don't see him going away anytime soon. All right, let's keep this thing moving. Just to kind of close out the center conversation, overrated, underrated, properly rated, William Nylander will eventually drive his own line this season.
Overrated. I don't think he will. I think that they will give him, there will be a stretch of hockey this year where William Nylander is a center for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll be November to January. He'll go some sort of cold streak and they'll want to shake it up. They'll give Holmberg a look. He'll go back to the wing and he'll score 6 times in 3 or 4 games and they'll go, what are we doing? And all of a sudden he's a winger again. I just don't think he wants to do that. I wrote an article last Friday, not sure if you saw it, on the Leafs making what looks like a system change to me, where they're running now a system where the centers are going to stay lower. The D are going to play higher in the D zone. Like if the puck goes up the wall, looks to me like the D are following that player up the wall with it, man on man a little bit more than they have been in the past, which means your centers have to stay low more, which means Nylander would have to play net front more. Outside Nylander, I like this change for the Leafs because Matthews does it so well. Kampf does it so well. Tavares at least knows where to be. But Nylander playing center net front for the Leafs is just too big an ask for me.
Mm-hmm. See, I think that the way that this team is going to have its most success is if they can unlock a way for those 3 guys to be on 3 separate lines. I believe it.
Hasn't happened yet, has it?
I know it hasn't. And I wonder if somewhere in the year, if they can get a center, if that becomes the priority at the deadline, and they can grab someone even, 75% of what you'd be hoping for as the third line, halfway offensive-ish center, if that eventually becomes Nylander's partner. And he's someone where he and Keefe, that Keefe and the coaching staff continue to do their juggling thing, but that they still are able to throw the 3 different waves at you. And that includes, Matthews on his own, Tavares back with Marner, which a lot of people have always believed in, and then some iteration of Nylander doing something. I'm with you that I think we wasted our time with the center stuff. And I think we bought into too big of a narrative that he would want to prove himself in the contract. I think he's fairly comfortable with what his value is as a player already.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that of all the guys to put on their own line, so yeah, like Matthews could absolutely, you could put a couple of dogs with him and he's still going to score 40-some goals this year. I feel like Nylander can do that. Like if you play him with a couple of guys, he doesn't need other people to set him up. He creates so much himself that I really feel like you could put him on a third line with just a couple of lowercase g guys, and he would be just fine. So I like that idea. It's a good theory. The two-line theory for the Leafs has not panned out so far, so hopefully they get to a solid three-line system at some point.
Yeah, and even if you look at they went, oh, look at these new offensive additions that the team has. Well, it's like, yeah, Bertuzzi and Domi right now are in the top 6. Like... What? So we're really expecting Nyes to be the elevator on the third line then? Okay. Like, I really like Nyes. I think we all like Nyes. But, yeah, that's a little bit harder for me to see. Okay. So,
I'd like to see Nyes with players, by the way. I don't want to see him with Minton and Yarncroc. I'd like to see him have someone to work with.
That's an interesting one, too. And it's also going to be fun to see that in the season, how much they do the tinkering there. Like, how much room he has to move up and how much of this right now with Domi is... Yep, we're starting you here with the top guys out of respect for who you are and part of potentially a promise to get him to sign. But what is the runway of a player who is, I think, kind of controversial. He was a controversial signing. He was one of those guys that I referenced, like poor defensively, good offensively, but not great offensively, a known name, a commodity, probably going to be a fan favorite, but someone who's probably going to piss Sheldon Keefe off certain times of the year, fair to say?
Yeah.
Like what it looks like in terms of the flipping there at left wing. Okay, last Nylander one, though. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. Nylander's contract will be a distraction this season.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that he gets it signed in the next month. Like I think Tree Living really doesn't want this to be a spectacle. I think, watching him in the preseason, Willie's a special player. You're going to want to hang on to this guy. The early preliminary cap talk for next year is that it goes up to 87.7. You're going to have some dollars to spend. I know Matthews' contract goes up a little bit. I think they'll take care of it and then try to figure it out from there. You just can't lose this guy. No one can make a real trade right now because everyone's banged up against the salary cap themselves. So you're going to get worse if you trade him. So I think they'll find a way to just get a contract done.
I said that to me, if I was painting the narrative for this entire season, it would be that it's the death of the all-in year. Like that's not a thing anymore, right? Part of that was, and you know what? Let this be a lesson to Mark Shapiro of just... Brendan Shanahan removed a general manager. He's still at the top, and it just feels like there's a weight off of this team. Like, from a fan base standpoint, where they're like, oh, let's see what the new GM can do, even though it's the guy at the very top still calling a lot of the shots in Brendan Shanahan. You go, all right. It just feels different. It doesn't feel like there's as much pressure to get this thing done. And, now I'm looking at it and saying the time that they could have traded one of the core 4 guys, and really we're talking about 3 of the guys, and really we're talking about 2 of the guys because it was Nylander and it was Marner all along. It's passed. It's passed them by. They had their opportunity to do that when those guys had multiple years left on the contract, right? Like, if you look back, realistically, it was after the Montreal series. And people went, well, it's during a pandemic and it's a flat cap, and what are you going to get back? And it was Jack Eichel for Marner, which would have been a disaster. Like, it's gone by. They let that. You're not trading Nylander anymore and getting cents on the dollar back unless it's a massively like something happens with him, right? Where he just demands out and they go, oh crap, we can't deal with this. And I just don't think that's very likely given who he is as a player. So I think that's passed. I think they're re-signing Nylander, and I think that they're going into this new era of no Tavares in a couple of years, or Tavares on a highly reduced number with a bunch more cap space. But that brings me to this one. Overrated, underrated, properly rated. 4 of the Leafs defensemen in their top 6 are on the final years of their deals.
I would say underrated. That's an interesting storyline to look at. One of the things we talked about before I joined your show today was doing some sort of like predictions for the season, some sort of things you can see coming. And I think this Leafs team has 2 to 3 different defensemen by playoffs. Like I look at this group right now and I'm like, who is who can't go anywhere? Morgan Riley is not going anywhere. I like his number. He's a great player, great playoff player for them. Jake McCabe, I think, is a really good guy, the type of player that they're looking for, like the number he's at. But yeah, he's got a contract coming up. Like Brody, Tree Living has passed on Brody in the past and even talked about trading him years before they moved on from him. And then Liljegren, Giordano is their bottom pair. I don't think that's the type of guys Tree's going to want. So I just think they're going to make changes on the back end over the course of this season, not today or tomorrow, but they're going to get there at some point.
Yeah, and I think another team is going to like the flexibility of being able to bring in a player and go, we're not tied to them in the future, right?
Yeah, at the deadline, if certainly could see that happening.
It does give you a little bit of added flexibility. I think it's going to really the underrated one out of these guys, because obviously they signed Klingberg to a 1-year deal. I think the underrated one that not enough people have really looked at or at least discussed the contract extension of is what happens. The path to this team being more successful is if Liljegren steps up into the top 4, right?
Yes.
That's the best possible outcome for the defensive pairings, although it does mean that you end up having Klingberg in your third pair at making $4+ million, and he cost you a depth guy like Sam Lafferty, who I think that was a bigger deal than it got made to be, considering how Sam looked for them in the playoffs last year. But yeah, the ideal path forward is for Liljegren to emerge as a top 4 guy. But then, what does that do? I really have no idea as of right now with the new cap and with a player like Liljegren, if he does have this breakout season, what his number looks like next year.
If Liljegren, I'll be honest, if Liljegren, and this is nothing against the guy, but if he doesn't take a step this year, I'm going to be hard on the team's insistence that he be a part of this thing, because every year they get the playoffs and go, well, he's not the guy. We can't use that guy. Put him in the press box. So if he's not the same guy, or if he looks like he did in years past, then you're going to end up there again. So it's time to get better at that spot for $1.4 million, I think it is he's making. You're right. I'm not sure what a number would look like, but I can't see how he would deserve a raise off what he's earned so far, given the way they use him when the chips are down.
That's totally correct. It's every year, hey, he's the X factor, and then every year in the postseason, they're like, can't play him. It's all right. And there was a stretch last season where I thought he was one of the Leafs' best regular season defensemen for a month, if not the best. And then, it just did that rapidly went away. Anyway, overrated, underrated, properly rated. The personalities brought in will matter more than in years past.
Say properly rated, right? There's been a ton of talk about it. I think they've been getting a lot of attention. They're also big personalities, which is nice. I think that's something the Leafs can always use a little bit of, people who are comfortable talking and looking people in the eye and doing that whole thing. But yeah, I think it's been talked about a good amount. I don't know that you're going to be able to change the core culture of this team at this point. Those guys have been around, but these are interesting people that they brought in, so I'm curious to see what the effect will be.
I'm really excited by these new players. I actually think that just watching Bertuzzi in the preseason a little with that line and the ugly but yet enjoyable style of the player, something that's going to drive McKee nuts all year long. The over-under on McKee being pissed about Bertuzzi's skates, where would you set that? 84.5?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a daily event.
But
what's funny is we already had a Bertuzzi talk on our show, I think on Friday, and Kip was already hope he looks better in the regular season than preseason, or some sort of passing comment. And Sam was, we're talking about his style and stuff. It's he's going to be held to a high standard. He's getting paid a lot of money. He's on the top line. So love a scrappy guy who looks like he's, doesn't care about anything except hockey, but he's going to have to play well. There's a lot of pressure.
Here's the thing. I think, it's a good point, but I just have a really hard time thinking it's going to miss, considering he's got that really nice backhand that is going to work well in tight around the net where he's going to have to be. He's a relentless forechecker, which is going to remind those guys of when they played with Zach Hyman. He's a energizer type that I think stylistically is going to fit with them with some actual finish. And then if I was looking back and doing I call it the Jared Sullinger test. I want to change it because I feel like I want Jared Sullinger on this podcast someday, and I can't skirt it. But the Jared Sullinger test to me is like you ask former fan bases what they think of the player, right? Mm-hmm. And people who covered the team, what they thought of that player. And so I was asking people all the way back to Detroit, some people who cover the Red Wings, and I was asking some people around Boston, what they thought of Bertuzzi during their time with him. And it was just universally, this guy has great hockey IQ. Mm-hmm. And I went, the great hockey IQ player who has that dog in him around those two players, if I'm making a bet, I'm going to bet that it works out.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty intelligent way to look at it, and I think the team has done the same thing. Even reading Morgan Riley's quote on Bertuzzi that he didn't know how skilled he was, mm-hmm. and not as an insult, but you don't always realize that these scrappy guys, he can handle the puck and do nifty things and has good vision. So yeah, there's every opportunity for that to work for sure. And not to mention, this is a guy who had, the Bruins choked away the best regular season in history last year, by the way, and Bertuzzi was the only guy for them. He had 10 points in that 7-game series for Boston. That's really encouraging on a team where, it's not like, wait till playoffs and see what they do. Bertuzzi can at least make that claim.
I love that. That's honestly one of my favorite things, is that the Bruins got embarrassed badly, and the Leafs took the one guy. They were really happy about that. They went, no, he was great, though. This guy was amazing. Our goaltender is horrific. That whole season of us talking about how we have 2 Vezina candidates. That part didn't really work out. Okay, 2 more. This is an Austin Matthews legacy season.
Yeah. I think that's properly rated, I'm going to say, because I don't know that anyone disagrees that it's an important year for him. He scored 40 times last year. So did Willie Nylander. That's not, anywhere in the ballpark of the elites in goal scoring. Connor McDavid scored 64 times, 24 more goals than Matthews last year. This is a guy that we have been calling unequivocally the best goal scorer in the NHL since basically the moment he entered the league. He outperforms Ovechkin, Pasternak, whoever else you think is in the conversation. His numbers are way better. He did not hang with the best goal scorers in the league last year. If this is the start of a tail, then yeah, that would be devastating for a legacy where all of a sudden at 25 or something he's going the wrong direction. So it's important for him to reestablish himself as one of the game's elite scorers.
I think it's completely underrated. And that it's going to really dawn on people as they get into the season. Because if it's a lot of what last year was, it's going to take a lot of wind out of the sails for Toronto's Stanley Cup aspirations for this season. And just in terms of what this window where he has this 4-year contract means for the team. Because I was thinking about this. Who's the better player in the conference now? Like watching Sid last night and the Bedard thing. If they were doing an Eastern Conference, who is the best player? Is it not supposed to be Matthews by a pretty healthy margin?
Yeah, it's supposed to be, sure.
Right.
Won the Hart Trophy 2 years ago.
Yeah. And the premise here is the Bruins are supposed to take a step back. The Lightning are supposed to take a step back, and they're a team that you finally beat. He's in his age 26 season. He just got a brand new contract. And yeah, he's coming off of a down year where he didn't score in his final 5 playoff games, despite being one of the biggest and best scorers in the NHL. I kind of feel as though in this quote-unquote more open Atlantic, this more mature Leafs team, with him getting Marner back on his line and having Bertuzzi, who's supposed to be kind of this perfect counterpart, that, yeah, we should be back having Matthews in the Hart conversations. If not, then I think it's not going to be great.
Yeah, it's funny, in talking about this, my first thought, and this is my degenerate gambling mode, is just I should bet on Matthews to score tonight and in the first few games.
Yeah.
I think there's real incentive for him to come out of the gates well. You're playing Montreal and then Minnesota. You're going to have some looks here. You're on the best line in hockey, or one of them there with McDavid. You're right. I think this guy should be shooting hockey pucks in the net in the first couple weeks.
All right. Then we've just established that we're both betting the whatever he's going to be against Montreal, a team that he's owned, is minus 280 for Matthews to score a goal tonight.
Well, to score, it'll probably be minus 120 or something?
No, it'll be I think it'll be for less than that. It'll be worse. It'll be closer to minus 180, minus 160. My guess, anyway. This is just me guessing. But yeah, Matthews to score against arguably the worst team in the league, who, by the way, always beats Toronto in these games, and just for us is just such a piss-off moment where you go, they're way better, and then Montreal finds a way to beat them in the home opener. Ugh,
Do you like that it was a Dubas team last night that did that, though?
Buddy, it was so great. It was so great. I tweeted he lost to he lost to Peter Mrazek and Nick Foligno to start a year with a new team. It couldn't. He was doing the Russ Cole time is a flat circle where he went just something. I can't escape some of my narratives. And yeah, Carlson's a -2. It's one game, but I went, that's kind of fun. That was fun. I'm allowed to enjoy this a little as a fan, all right? I'm allowed to have a little bit of schadenfreude. Right. I think the Matthews thing is big. And yeah, he can't be another. This sounds so stupid to say, but I think we all agree. Like, it sounds stupid, but everyone agrees this is right. He can't be a 40-goal scorer.
No, a 50 for the floor if healthy.
Yeah.
If he plays 75 games or something, I think you're right.
Right. Like, he's got to establish himself unquestionably again as the best player in the conference. And as when people go, yeah, all right, it's McDavid at the top, that people start going, yeah, it's also Matthews ahead of Draisaitl because he's a 200-foot player. Like, he's one of the better defensive guys in the NHL, but he also scores 50 goals, right? So he shouldn't be compared to Draisaitl. Like, I just if
50 goals in the Selke for Matthews this year. Take it.
That's what I'm saying. Is if he's in kind of those places where you go, he's a rocket type of guy. Maybe he doesn't win it, but then he's also a plus defender, and he's unquestionably better than Draisaitl there. Then you're back to feeling like Toronto is a Stanley Cup contender, and I think Matthews' legacy as the best player that this franchise has ever had. Whatever you want to do with that, it becomes a little bit more secure. Last one, the goaltenders are a bigger question mark than originally thought.
Yeah, tough, right? Because last year we talked ourselves into it last year with Samsonov and Woll, but like, God, the preseason, neither of them looked good at all, and they're both on these smaller deals. But Samsonov, it's one of those things where it's either like it's going to work and you're going to extend him, or I guess you're handing the keys off to a guy who's played 15 NHL games. So, yeah, you'd sure like one of them. I guess they'll alternate out of the gate, and you'd sure like one of them to really take the reins by November and have an idea who your starter is.
This is the only underrated part of it to me is like it seems really secure on paper because Woll's been around for a while, so he feels like more of a household name in this market. And then you look and it's like he started 13 games. Regular season.
Yeah.
And that the organization, while they waived Martin Jones and that we all thought that was going to be the outcome, they still brought him in, They still said, let's make sure there's someone else here. Let's make sure that there is an adult in the room in case things do go poorly. And yeah, there's probably a bit of an injury hedge, whatever. But Woll had a tough preseason, and so did Samsonov. And Samsonov, if you recall a year ago, had an amazing preseason where everyone said maybe this guy should actually be taking minutes from Matt Murray or starts from Matt Murray because he looks so good to start the year. And yeah, this stuff it's not going to matter nearly as much in October. Like, this is what we learned from last year with the way the Leafs started on the road against, the lesser lights, the San Jose and Anaheim trip. Like, things will level out. We'll get to January, February and have a better, more complete picture of the team. But yeah, in the world of goalies or lottery tickets, goalies or running backs, yeah, I think there's a little less for Samsonov to prove. It doesn't feel as comfortable for him this year in terms of, okay, I can just kind of be the guy behind the guy who steals the job from the guy. I have to be the guy who's mentally strong enough to make sure he keeps the job, right? Like, heavier is the head that wears the crown. And then a guy behind him who everybody likes, but, yeah, hasn't shown it consistently in front of a team that we're all expecting to take a step back defensively. So I just think it's something, yeah. I'm not trying to be pessimistic with that one, but it's something to keep an eye on. And you know me, I'm a goalie defender.
At least need Samsonov or Woll to be like the 15th best goalie in the league, and they'll be just fine. Like you need one of your starters to be in the middle of the pack.
And then that come playoff time.
Yeah.
Don't be the 15th anymore.
Yeah, have a hot streak at that time of year. But they're not asking, I think it was Luke Fox's recent article where he said, the NHL is a little watered down. I don't know that there's 32 legit number one starters in the NHL anymore. I don't know that there's 32 number one centers. But for goaltenders, like Samsonov, can he be Aiden Hill? Yeah, the bar's not that high, but you need him to be at least sort of middle of the pack.
This is how I felt watching hockey last night. is, boy, this league is a little watered down. Like, I shouldn't feel like, man, Chicago could be good. You know? I did. I had like 4 thoughts of, hey, what's Chicago? What did they had a goaltender? You know, maybe they'd be a little bit different. Anyways, Justin Bourne will be listening today. Again, congrats on the regional broadcast. I actually meant to talk to you more about, you doing TV and goals you had for this year, but your time is up. I'm sorry.
All right, pal. Thanks for having me.
Take care, bud. Justin Bourne.